To be truthful, he said, I wasn't sure I could pull it off. Knowing how you'd fallen in love with the place, I didn't want to risk getting your hopes up before being absolutely certain I could actually buy it. Proof, if proof were needed, she thought, of how lucky she was to have married him. Not many men would show such consideration for a woman's feelings.
Well, that's very thoughtful of you.
And then I thought, why not wait until today and tell you over lunch? 2 celebrations for the price of 1. Despite struggling to conceal her delight, Esme affected despair.
And there was I, thinking you'd forgotten all about it.
Forgotten about turning 30? Hardly.
No, silly.
Reaching between their empty glasses, she took hold of his hand.
Not your birthday, the house. When you made no further mention of it, I thought you'd gone off the idea. I assumed you thought it either too far from town or else beyond you financially, beyond the means of your grandfather's trust.
His grin softening to a smile, Richard squeezed her fingers. I happen to think the asking price perfectly reasonable, and I've known for some time how grandfather's trust stands because I've had access to it since we got married.
And you really don't think Teddington is too far out? You're sure it won't make for an arduous commute every day? Only you've always said that 6 stops on the tube and a short walk to the office is quite the luxury.
What she didn't want was for the practicalities of moving so far from town to hit home later on and give him cause for second thoughts. If he changed his mind, her disappointment would be unbearable. Actually, he said, his tone drawing her eyes to the sudden seriousness of his expression, I've been thinking I might hold on to the flat, at least until after the war. With the hours I'm expected to put in at the moment and the state of the trains, it could turn out to be a useful bolt hole.
And you can afford to do that? She asked.
While the attraction of keeping somewhere close to Whitehall was obvious, running 2 homes, especially in wartime, did seem a touch profligate. Besides, if that was his intention, would there be enough money to pay for both Nanny White and a daily woman? She might have fallen in love with the Teddington house, but she didn't fancy having to run it all on her own. I won't lie, Richard said. From a financial standpoint, it'll be tight. It'll certainly swallow up every penny from my promotion. But I've weighed it carefully and believe it will be worth the scrimping. Scrimping? There was a word she'd rather not hear.
Well, it's your money.
I prefer to think of it as our money.
I know you do, and that's incredibly generous of you, she said, her mind already on the matter of how to redecorate that lovely drawing-room. With its high ceilings and easterly aspect, it cried out for something light and airy. Perhaps a pale lemon colour for the walls, or even eau de Nil. But it's not our money, not really.
Anyway, he said, and with which she noticed how tightly he was suddenly grasping her hand. When we do eventually sell Anstruther, I was thinking it might not be a bad idea to set aside the proceeds for school fees. At the thought of their son, Esme's free hand went to her locket, the one Richard had given her the day they'd brought their darling Kit home from the hospital. Just last week she'd put a new photograph in it, one she'd snapped in the park on his 2nd birthday. Hard to grasp just how quickly he was growing up. Harder still to believe that they should be sat there discussing schools.
That would make sense.
After all, who knows how much that sort of thing will cost after the war? Richard was right. Making provision for Kit's school fees might seem dull now, but in a couple of years' time they would probably congratulate themselves for their foresight. Especially since it won't just be Kit to pay for.
And especially if we want him to...
Wait.